let me introduce myself. My name is Kajsa Ollongren. I'm currently the EU Special Representative for Human Rights. I'm also a former defense minister from the Netherlands, a colleague of one of the panelists, and I've been a member of the YES board, which is why I have the opportunity to be for the second time at the YES conference. Thank you, Victor. So today we are going to talk about the, let's say, security guarantees that Ukraine needs. And we have a panel that's very knowledgeable and also influential on this topic, and I'm going to introduce them to you shortly. Igor Zhovkva, I'm sure that many of you know him. He is the deputy head of the office of the president here in Kyiv. We have Sikorski, who is the deputy prime minister and also the minister of foreign affairs of Poland. Then we have Panetta, who came from Washington. He is a congressman, originally from California. I'm very happy to have you with us, Jimmy. And we have Hanno Pevkur, who is the Minister of Defense of Estonia, all here to talk about security guarantees. And of course, many things to be said on security guarantees. And I invite my panelists to be as specific as possible. So what types of security guarantees does Ukraine need? We're going to hear from Igor about that. What security guarantees and actual capabilities and troops are the European states able to provide? We will hear from Poland and from Estonia. And what role can and should the US play when it comes to security guarantees? Because we know that we will need the US backup to do this. So these are the topics. If we have time, I would be happy to have the audience to come in with questions. But I would like to start with Ukraine. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Igor, please tell us, what are the security guarantees that you are asking for?
So thank you. First of all, thank you for what you were doing at your position of the minister, Romania, from the first days of open aggression. Thank you for what you are doing now. Well, I will start probably with the understanding of the security guarantee, which we trying to curve during the regular meetings of my president with the leaders of the world. And just recently, as you well know, on the 4th of September, we had yet another meeting of the Coalition of the Willing. It was a hybrid format because many leaders were present in person in Paris, thanks to President Macron, who was organizing this event. Prime Minister Tusk was there. Prime Minister of Estonia was online. Steve Witko was in person. And we discussed, among other things, what should be the security guarantees. The name of the conference today, How to End the War. You will never end the war, real end the war, and real peace will not be established, just and lasting peace, without the security guarantees which Ukraine needs. I will outline the four main pillars, which is among the leaders, the discussion is still going on, but we came to the understanding what should be the security guarantees for Ukraine and why it is absolutely needed to work on them and to draft them and to think about them and construct them already now, even before the justice and lasting peace is established in Ukraine. So pillar number one, very important, the strong Ukrainian armed forces. This is the utmost and the main security guarantee for Ukraine and for the European continent. We see that Ukrainian army now is the strongest in Europe, and this is Ukrainian army who fights against the aggressor, having definitely not the second strongest army in the world like they claimed in the beginning of the open aggression, but certainly not the weakest one in the world. And this is the armed forces of Ukraine who are guaranteeing the peace will be established in Ukraine and will be guaranteeing that this peace is not ruined within some period of time as Russia may want it. The current number of the armed forces of Ukraine should be left as it is. And these armed forces, once again, they should be supported as they are supported now by like-minded countries. I'm not talking only about military equipment, arms and ammunition. I'm talking about support and financing, which will be needed even after the peace is established in Ukraine. Pillar number two, that's what we call now boots and flags on the ground. by boots and flags. During the last coalition of the willing, where 35 leaders were present, 35 countries were present, 26 out of them has concretely told us about their potential input into the security guarantees, into the boots and flags on the ground. Yes, some countries are talking about boots on the ground, and we really want it, because this is the real deterrence which we will be needing for Ukraine and to prevent the possible renewal or escalation of Russian aggression. But not all the countries are able to provide the boots on the ground. I will not, unfortunately, reveal now what is concrete input from which countries, but believe me, our CHOTs, our ministries of defense are working very intensively. And for the time being, this military component of security guarantees is rather significant than it was even half a year ago or several months ago. So some countries may present boots on the ground, some countries may present their flags, helping or making an input to the security guarantees in other formats. It can be equipment, it can be finance, it can be different ways of operation. And certainly we will be working on the increasing this amount of countries in future. The second component of a deterrence here is what some countries also arguing is what they call Article 5-like security guarantees. I see here Carlo, Ambassador of Italy, and we know that Italy is very active on this. But here we will have to be very serious to understand how it will operate, what will be the rules of engagement. By the way, it's also about the military contingent. So we were talking about Article 5, how it will be Article 5-like, how it will be implemented if we are not member of NATO, and we are not member of NATO as of now. We were talking with the leaders about the necessity to have a necessary security arrangements, security agreements. We have currently 28 agreements with the countries, with like-minded countries. But this is the basis. If we are really serious about Article 5-like security guarantees, it should be clearly put on paper. The discussion may be whether it should be bilateral security agreements, as we have now, so for them to be upgraded, or it can be a multilateral security agreement. It's also possible. So that for the time being, the discussions are going on, but certainly this idea, if it brings the additional security to Ukraine, is also very important. Pillar number 3, membership of Ukraine to the EU. You heard President yesterday. He is advocating for clearly setting the date for Ukraine to be ready to become a member of the EU. We are doing our home task. The previous panel, there was lots of talks about anti-corruption. We are finalizing our screening. By 30th of September, we'll be finalizing all the screening on the clusters. We should be technically ready for this decision when this decision is made. Because without the full-fledged membership of Ukraine to the EU, we will never have a full-fledged victory. Membership of Ukraine to the EU is a very significant component of the security guarantees, not only economic part, but also a political and civilizational part. And finally, pillar number 4, which is about economy in broader sense, which is about sanctions, which is about frozen assets, and which is about reconstruction and recovery of Ukraine. Sanctions, we all do understand. There is a huge discussion now going on what is more effective, and President Trump said this discussion in the phone call with the leaders in Paris, what is more effective, sanctions or tariffs, but this should be a part of the security guarantees. Certainly frozen assets, and I'm glad that now countries are making their progress in understanding that these frozen assets should work already for the sake of Ukraine. And certainly recovery and reconstruction. My president argues that it's already high time to establish a kind of coalition of countries who will be particularly interested and, instrumental in already planning the recovery and reconstruction plan. We all remember the Marshall Plan. We may have another plan for reconstruction of Ukraine. But again, without this component, security guarantees will not be effective.
Thank you very much, Igor. This is really comprehensive, and I understand that everything is connected. I want to focus on the first 2 points you make. So the strong Ukrainian armed forces and the boots and flags on the ground, as you say. And I would like to go to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, because first of all, recently you had the incursion of your airspace by Russian drones. That has an effect on all of us, but especially also on Poland. And secondly, I would like to ask you to comment on that. But secondly, also, previously, I believe it was your Prime Minister who said, we will not put boots on the ground in Ukraine. So if you hear what Igor has just outlined, is that still your position?
Well, first of all, thank you for mentioning the Russian incursion into Poland, and I'd like to thank publicly the magnificent action of Dutch pilots in that operation, and I'm sure you had a role in preparing your Air Force to be capable of doing it. But I also want to attract your attention to the fact that the Russian government is saying simultaneously two things. Number one, it was a mistake that Russian drones flew into Poland. Number two, last night at the UN Security Council, the Russian ambassador saying it was a physical impossibility for Russian drones to reach Polish territory. So take your pick. Which lie do you believe? So you see, the drones that the Dutch pilots shot down over Poland were launched by Poland itself. Poland attacked itself, according to Russian propaganda. What's amazing is that some people believe this stuff. But we don't, and we shouldn't be fooled. Now, as regards guarantees, I have an intellectual problem with this entire discussion. And not only because Ukraine already has guarantees. They were called assurances, but what was meant in the Budapest Memorandum was that if Ukraine gives up its nuclear arsenal, Russia, United States, UK, France, and I think tangentially China, will make sure that Ukraine will not regret that Ukraine's independence and borders will be respected forever, as a signal to everyone, to the whole world, that you can protect yourself without nuclear weapons. And those assurances, guarantees have, of course, already been broken, and not only by Russia. Secondly, Russia already has, Ukraine has a border treaty with Russia, 2004, solemnly ratified by the Russian parliament and signed by President Putin. Thirdly, what is the meaning and purpose of security guarantees? The security guarantee is meant to deter a potential adversary. It is a communique. If you attack the recipient of the guarantee, we will go to war in his defense. And therefore, don't try. So what we are saying is that if there is some kind of peace, the next time Russia tries anything against Ukraine, we might go to war with Russia. Now, I find that not very credible. Because if you want to go to war with Russia, you can do it today. And I see no volunteers. And there is nothing more dangerous in international relations than giving a guarantee that is not credible. We received guarantees from France and Britain in the 1930s. And they were fulfilled in the sense that France and Britain declared war on Nazi Germany, but did nothing about it. We had a so-called phony war on the Western Front. We thought the guarantees were credible because we thought it was in those two countries' self-interest to open a second front. You know, in 39, not in 44. But their calculus was different. And so, as a recipient of the guarantees, we were braver vis-à-vis a potential adversary than we should have been. But it's also dangerous for the giver of the guarantees, because then it's the recipient that decides when the war starts by defending himself. So what we are actually discussing here is not guarantees. It's the its peace monitoring and the strengthening of Ukraine. Good thing. And by the way, NATO-like guarantees, you should be careful with that, because the NATO treaty is less definite than people think. The NATO treaty obliges members to react to an attack on another member, but it doesn't say how. And this is not by accident. It's because US Congress in the 1940s very deliberately wouldn't agree to anything stronger, because it is Congress's power to wage war, to declare war, not the executives. At least that was the thinking then. The EU treaty is actually more precise. So maybe that's a way. And Ukraine already has, what, 24 bilateral agreements? 20, so 28. So more than 24 agreements with countries with an action plan, including with Poland, and it's a robust one, about what we will do to strengthen Ukraine. So what we are discussing here is a Western operation to strengthen Ukraine if there is a ceasefire. Good, and it should be taken seriously. And some countries have declared a brigade or two. Poland, and I think right now you can see why we have been consistent on this. 95% of what gets to Ukraine gets here through Poland. We have this huge logistical hub, and some media have speculated, I'm not confirming it, that the non-Russian drones were on the way to hit that hub. Non-Russian in inverted commas, of course. And so Poland sees its main duty protecting that hub and protecting the north and east of the logistical lines for that operation. And we actually have a command of support of the logistical operation in Ukraine. And I'll finish by just one sentiment. Yes, let us do contingency planning for post-ceasefire. And of course, Ukraine has accepted unconditionally the ceasefire, but Russia hasn't. And I don't see any evidence that Putin is about to make a deal. So my worry is that this self-absorbing discussion about the peace operation is distracting and demobilizing our political class and our public from the more urgent task, which is to find the money and the equipment for Ukraine for next year and the year after that, because we should be planning for the medium term. And if Putin changes his policy, that will be a bonus. But he is more likely to change policy if he sees that we are willing and able to support Ukraine in the medium term. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Turning to you, Congressman, hearing what the minister just said, thinking about, I've been in the room when we had NATO discussions and when we promised Ukraine membership of NATO, which is now off the table. Knowing the importance of US involvement in any type of security guarantees of strengthening the Ukrainian armed forces in the way the minister just described, and we heard from Igor as well. What do you think in the current climate in Washington that is feasible?
Obviously, thank you, and obviously thanks to the Yalta European Strategy for having me. I appreciate this opportunity. And just before we get to that, I think it says a lot that the president was piped in and gave his message about the conference and the nebulous message about moving forward, I guess I'll say. But what I would hope is that he not be the only voice for Ukraine in the United States. I cannot stress that enough. Now look, when I travel abroad, I like to leave politics at the shoreline. And so what I will say is about the policy of this administration. And the policy of this administration, unfortunately, when it comes to Vladimir Putin, has just been dragged by the nose by Putin. And that you see that you have a president who talked about a ceasefire, and that's no longer on the table. You have a president who talked about sanctions, yet it's not being imposed. You have a president who talked about a sit-down with your president and Vladimir Putin, and that's not happening. And you have a president who said he wants to avoid bloodshed, yet he allows Putin to carry out the strikes recently that he has. And so once again, I don't think you should look to my president as the voice for our support for Ukraine in the United States. That's exactly why I'm here, and why I know other members of Congress will be coming next weekend as well. Because we want you to know that there is support for Ukraine, not just now, but going forward, especially when it comes to any sort of security guarantees. Because I do believe that when it comes to security guarantees, the United States has to be there. The United States has to have the backing, has to provide the backing for the guarantees that need to be provided. Now, what that looks like is obviously you had some excellent articulations of the potential for security guarantees by the two people before me, by two ministers before me. And I think that's right. But what we can't have, I believe, and what I will advocate for against my administration, is that Vladimir Putin can't have a veto over these security guarantees. I just don't understand how a country that's trying to delegitimize another country then has a veto power over a security guarantee for that country. I don't understand that. And so that is something that I will continue to advocate. But I do believe that going forward, obviously we have the gold standard of Article 5, but then where we can go from there. Now, it's either looking from top down or bottom up. You heard bottom up in the 4 pillars by the minister, and I think that's true. I think there has to be a steel porcupine, as the vernacular that's being called of the Ukrainian armed forces is very, very important. There has to be the coalition of the willing that we're hearing more of that want to be a part of it. And I think that's kind of how you tie it in to a potential Article 5-like assurances with the United States. It's how you tie in the United States, which I feel is very, very important as well. And so please know, despite the fact that, like I said, you have a president being led by the nose, I believe, by Vladimir Putin, please know that there are members of Congress who want to make sure that if there is a deal, if there are security guarantees, that the United States plays its part when it comes to that, and that's the least we can do.
Thank you very much. So, Hanno, you come from a country that is exposed to Russia simply by its geography. Hearing all of this, I think previously you were one of the countries very much relying on and hoping for the US. If you look at the current situation, what would your best bet be? To have the US in there for the security guarantees and for ourselves in NATO? Or to work on a much stronger European security, just in case that the US is not there anymore? Hanno.
Well, thank you, Kajsa. Victor, thank you very much for inviting me. Before going to that, I just wanted to echo to Radek. So you mentioned that, maybe you shot yourself with the drones. What the Russian representative in NATO said. So that, and you mentioned also the Nazi Germany. So that remembered me that there was a person in Nazi Germany named Goebbels who said that if you tell the lie big enough and keep repeating it, then people start to believe it. So I believe that this is maybe the way Russians see this at the moment, that they want to keep telling the lies. But coming to the question, of US backing us all and what are the security guarantees for Ukraine, maybe we should rephrase it. And rephrase, because I believe that no one in the room is on the opinion that that Ukraine will not be in the European Union. So we all believe that Ukraine will be in the European Union and member of the European family, and these family of the European Union. So when we have that confidence, then maybe we should rephrase it and say, what are the security guarantees for Europe? And then the answer is Ukraine. So when we have this understanding that at the moment today, the best security guarantee for Europe is Ukraine with the strongest army in Europe, then maybe we can also understand a bit easier how to help Ukraine to win this war. As I said yesterday during the night owl also, that we should ask from ourselves a very simple question. Do we want to have 1 million army on our side or on the Russian side? Do we want to have 110 brigades on our side or on the Russian side? And then the perspective will change immediately, and then there is no question. And for me, the security guarantee for Europe has always been Article 5, NATO, which means that also the best security guarantee for Ukraine is Article 5 and NATO. So when you put all this together, then as long we cannot have Ukraine very quickly in NATO, then we should see how we can get them as soon as possible. So to help rebuild the Ukrainian army, reconstitute it, no question. And at the end of the day, will it be 110 brigades or 80 brigades or 90 brigades? This is not important. Important is that Ukrainian army will have the same standards what the NATO armies have. This is why we have the IT coalition. This is why we have armed coalition, different coalitions, to help to rebuild the Ukrainian army also to the standards what NATO has. And then in day one, when we don't have any obstacles anymore to bring them in, we can do that. Secondly, to do that, of course, we need to be here. So there is no question. So we need to be on the ground. And this needs to be Europe who is here, because Ukraine is part of Europe. Estonia said from the very beginning that yes, we are ready to bring our forces to Ukraine to back the security of Ukraine. But we need more, and then we know we need all the European countries to do that, and together with the United States. So this is clear. And last but not least, when we think that what is the ultimate goal, then it's simple, as I said. Sovereign and free Ukraine in NATO, in European Union, and most and foremost, Russians out of Ukrainian territory. They cannot say that they will pick one moment in the history and say that this is the right moment. No. Then we can go to the Mongols to ask how they look at the history being ruling the Russians over 300 years. Then we can go to Roman Empire, etc. You cannot choose the time of the history and say that this is the right moment. You have to accept and respect the international agreements, and in Ukrainian case, we have to go to 91.
Thank you. Minister Sikorski, you wanted to come in on one of his points that Hanno made.
I just want to suggest to you that we should smoke out the former Prime Minister of Sweden, which of course was a country that was technically neutral during the Cold War, but had bilateral agreements with NATO countries that amounted to almost a security guarantee. How did it work, Carl?
We give a microphone to Carl Bildt, if there is one. Carl, go ahead.
Well, rather, you're exaggerating slightly, because we didn't have any open agreements, but we had sort of tacit understandings. But with not only the Americans, but with others as well. But at the end of the day, it has to be said, did we believe in them? So. They were good to have, but we were convinced that in the ultimate situation, we would have to rely primarily on our own resources. They were what you call a backup, possibly, particularly, by the way, on the nuclear side, but not something that we had in paper, not something that we were saying, well, we can relax. We said our own defense efforts were absolutely key, and then the fact that we had these understandings was good to have, but we had a realistic understanding of the world.
Yeah, thank you. And I think also we have to realize that Sweden and Finland, they decided that it was time to join NATO when Russia invaded Ukraine. And that was not for nothing. It was very significant. And the security guarantees that Sweden and Finland got then, they were strong, but that was also on the path to NATO membership, of course. It's easier to give security guarantees when you know that they're entering NATO. Sorry for commenting as a moderator. Sorry, Igor, you wanted to come in. Go ahead.
I wanted to react on what Radek said. I mean, Radek, we are no less skeptical than you on the agreements which are already on paper. And please, let's forget this infamous Budapest Memorandum. It is not the best example, or one of the worst examples of guaranteeing the security of Ukraine, and we know this. When I was talking about security guarantees, pillar number 1 and the armed forces, and the security guarantees in this pillar is already working, because Estonia was the first to declare 0.25% of its GDP for the military support of Ukraine, and now even exaggerating this, if I'm not mistaken, 0.3 and even higher. So
and that could bring around.
Yeah. Thank you for this.
Yeah. Well, but just to understand what that means. So, of course, in absolute terms, it's not much. But
Yes.
when all the allies would do the same, it would be around 110, 120 billion dollars annually.
Exactly. So, thank you for this once again for the rest of the countries, for the Baltic states, and yes, other countries, please follow this suit. I mean, that would be very important for us. So this is point number 1, pillar number 1, which is already working. Secondly, Radek, you well know we have a security guarantees agreement with Poland. And you certainly remember it because I had the privilege and an intellectual challenge to negotiate it with your people. Tough negotiations, really tough, but I think we have one of the best agreements. I would just remind to the audience that one of the points of the agreement is that Poland provide the fighter jets along with the other lines of equipment, the concrete figure for the military support of Ukraine, helping Ukraine to mobilize Ukrainians in your country to form the new brigades and equipment and training. Certainly, we failed to insert one provision to this agreement. I remember these tough discussions about the collective air defense capabilities. You remember, Radek. Maybe that would be useful now within the circumstances which we are having in your country as well. What I am driving at, I mean, we have this agreement, and I do think it's working. We failed to make it legally binding, although I was insisting, but your side told maybe it's too premature, so let's not have it legally binding. Let's not it be ratified in the parliament. So my suggestion is very simple. Let's upgrade this agreement. Let's insert even more stronger provisions. Let's have the provision about collective air defense in your country, in the western part of my country. We know a little bit how to intercept drones with different layers of defense, mobile groups, drone interceptors, helicopters, fighter jets, drone interceptors, etc., etc., etc. So, I mean, we are suggesting now, and once again, this is only one element of the security guarantees we want. Let's have, if need should be, with certain countries or a multilateral, legally binding security guarantee agreement when we will lay down what do we understand in Article 5 like behavior if need should be. Because for the contingent, for the military contingent, it's a little bit different story. You need the rules and engagement and the terms of command. And that's what our military are already doing. And the number of countries willing to provide the contingent for you, the parts of the contingent, is growing. And it's very good. But it's only one of the pieces of the security guarantees, along with the other pillars I was mentioning about.
Thank you very much. Let me, because time is up, but I want to end with the Congressman, because I think it was very encouraging what you said. He's also a former serviceman himself. If you give security guarantees that are strong, that deter, because that's the purpose of the whole thing, it means you have to be there in the long run. And the US knows this. In Korea, you have 30,000 troops deployed still after more than 70 years. Do you think, looking at the current atmosphere in Washington, but also looking at what you said, you know, there is a strong voice in Washington to do this, that it is feasible in the long run?
Yes, but just right now, as we're seeing, the current political makeup is obviously a Republican House, a Republican Senate, that literally takes their marching orders from the Republican White House, unfortunately. And that's what we've seen throughout the past 9 months of a Republican Congress that's sort of capitulated to what the president wants. I say that as the foundation to let you know that if there is going to be anything, at least in the next year, when it's the Republican majority that there is, the trifecta that they have, it's got to come from the White House. Donald Trump and the administration have got to lead on this, not be dragged along by Putin, but actually lead on this. And so if there is going to be something that comes out of it, it's got to come from the White House, it's got to come from the president, because unfortunately, my Republican colleagues, for the most part, will do what they says. Now, don't get me wrong. There are many Republicans in the House and in the Senate that are firm believers in Ukrainian defense and Ukrainian independence, and ultimately providing the security guarantees that are necessary for Ukrainian democracy. However, it makes it very, very difficult when you have a strong force that they do in the White House on anything, as we've seen in the past 9 months, and that's how it's going to be for the next year.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the panel, and let's say that we had the message from President Trump this morning, and this is the message from this panel back to him. Thank you very much.